So reading today from Caitanya Caritamrita, Adi-lila, chapter 3, text 87. Text 89, text 87. 87. Okay. Hoite hoite halagarbha Trayodashamasa Tatapi bhumishtanahe Mishrera hailatrasa Haite haite halagarbha Trayodashamasa Tatapi bhumishtanahe Mishrera hailatrasa Haite haite hailagarbha Trayodashamasa Tatapi bhumishtanahe Mishrera hailatrasa Ladies?
Haite haite haile garbha Trayodashamasa Tatapi bhumishtanahe Mishrera hailatrasa Haite haite haile garbha Trayodashamasa Tatapi bhumishtanahe Mishrera hailatrasa
Haite haite, thus becoming. Haila, it so became. Garbha, pregnancy. Trayodasha, 13th. Masa, month. Tatapi, still. Bhumishtha, delivery. Nahe, there was no sign. Mishrera, of Jagannath Mishra. Haila, became. Trasa, apprehension. In this way, the pregnancy approached its 13th month, but still there was no sign of the delivery of the child. Thus, Jagannath Mishra became greatly apprehensive. Please repeat. In this way, the pregnancy approached its 13th month, but still there was no sign of the delivery of the child. Thus, Jagannath Mishra became greatly apprehensive. Text, there's no purport, so we'll go on to next one, and there's no purport for that, and so we'll go on to the following one. Nilambara Chakravati Kahila Ganiya Emase Putra Habe Shubha Kshanapana. Nilambara Chakravati, the grandfather of Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu, then did an astrological calculation and said that in that month, taking advantage of an auspicious moment, the child would take birth. Chaudru shata shata shake masa ye phalguna purnamasira sandhya kale haila shubhakshana. Thus, in the year 1407 of the Shaka era, in the month of Phalgun, March, April, on the evening of the full moon, the desired auspicious moment appeared. So now we have in the purport, Srila Prabhupada gives an explanation of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's horoscope according to Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur. So, the explanation of the horoscope given by Bhaktivinoda Thakur is that at the time of the birth of Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, the constellations were situated as follows. Shukra, Venus, and the constellation of the Ashvini stars were in the Mesha Rashi, Aries. Ketu, the ninth planet, and Uttara Palguni were in the Singha Rasi, Leo. Chandra, the moon, was in Purva Palguni, the 11th lunar mansion. Shani, Saturn, and Jyesta were in Vrishchika, Scorpio. Brihaspati, Jupiter, and Purvashadha were in Dhanu, Sagittarius. Mangala, Mars, and Shravana were in the Makara, Capricorn. Ravi, the sun, was in Kumbharas, Aquarius. Rahu was in Purva Bhadrapada, and Buddha, Mercury, was in Uttara Bhadrapada, and Uttara Bhadrapada were in Meena, Pisces. The day was Singha Lagna. So I'm sorry to say I don't know anything about astrology. However, we know that Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's appearance was the most auspicious event that has graced Kali Yuga, because his appearance absolutely changed everything that was going on and would be going on in Kali Yuga. So it so happened that on the evening of that full moon, there was an eclipse. And the practice of the Hindus of the time, who were, especially in Navadvip, there were very many scholars gathered in Navadvip, and they used to study the Shastras. So the practice was that they would go to the Ganges. And because this time when Rahu covers the moon is considered not an auspicious time, everybody would submerge in the water and they would chant the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra. So you had these like roar everywhere of the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra. And even the Muslims were like imitating. So they were also chanting. You know how people go out in the street and they go, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. Try to imitate it, and they think they're very funny, and you're thinking, oh my gosh, they're chanting the holy name. So this is exactly what was happening at the time. The Muslims were chanting Hare Krishna by default, and everybody else was chanting Hare Krishna. So it was sort of showed the dawn of what was the sort of arising of what was to become with Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's advocate. So the word auspicious has so many meanings or synonyms, and it's kind of like something that is going to produce all good, really. It's fortuitous, it's propitious, it's going to produce, it's going to succeed, it's lucky. Actually, the word lucky comes from Lakshmi, lucky. They used to say lucky in Bengal. So the word lucky that the English have comes from that Bengali word. So much luck was coming from Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's advocate for coming. So when we look back at that history, I mean, of course, we were fortunate to be around in 1986 when it was the 500th anniversary of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's appearance. And there was such a wonderful festival. The whole of Navadvip, turned out, not just at ISKCON, but the whole of Navadvip, they just turned out. There were like huge Maha Sankirtan parties coming every day to the ISKCON Chandradaya Mandir temple, and up and down the Bhaktisiddhanta Road, the whole place was just awash with the holy names. It was very, you felt very privileged to be there at that time. because you just got the sense of the deep meaning for all of the residents around that area of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's coming. And we also, of course, there was much celebration. It was celebrated very nicely, and we went out to all the different pastime places of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. But it just, for me, it really struck me that all these people are so, their lives have been transformed by the holy name. We had our little ISKCON temple, and temples all around, but all these thousands of people had come from far around to take part in this Sankirtan movement. So we know that when Krishna came 5,000 years ago, he spoke Bhagavad Gita on the battlefield of Kurukshetra, and that Bhagavad Gita is available to every single one of us, and it's like a personal instruction. As Prabhupada said, you should think that Krishna is instructing you. When you read the Bhagavad Gita, you should feel the same way Arjuna felt, which was that Krishna was instructing him. So, apart from that, there wasn't a sort of a movement there that kind of pushed on and increased at that time after Krishna's disappearance, because we know that Dwarka was covered and Vrindavan, Krishna personally went to Vrindavan before he left, and he took all the residents back to the spiritual world. So everybody was conscious of Krishna in some way, but there wasn't that sort of consolidated movement to worship Krishna. And, as time goes, it's just the way of the material world and Kali Yuga, things degraded. So there was a great lack, which Advaita Acharya and the wonderful devotees from Krishna's pastimes, they all preceded Lord Chaitanya. They came to Navadvip, and they took birth in families and appeared in various places. So they were all around, but they were very much lamenting the fact that their Lord and Master, Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, was not present. So they would hold great kirtan festivals all through the night and blissfully chant Hare Krishna. But they felt aggrieved that there were so many people who, even though they were studying the Vedas there, they were not they weren't really Vaishnavas. They didn't really understand what they were, the true meaning of what they were studying. So here Lord Chaitanya comes at this very auspicious time. And so much changed in Navadvip with his advent. Of course, we know that he took part in childish pastimes, and his days of being a student and early days of being a teacher. Lord Chaitanya was kind of hidden, although he variously showed his pastimes to special devotees, but his kind of was a hidden, very much hidden incarnation at that time. And it wasn't until he decided to start the Naga Sankirtan movement in Navadvip that everybody became aware that this prankster and this he was the most learned scholar of the time. He could defeat everybody, but they were just thinking, he's just a proud scholar. So then, once Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu revealed who he was, then everybody's hearts became thrilled and imbued with that love of the Lord, and the whole sort of impetus for spreading these holy names and for that benediction that followed of this, Naga Sankirtan really started to develop. And Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, of course, in Navadvip, the whole thing really took off. And then Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu went from there, because he's all auspicious, so wherever he goes is auspicious. So then he went to South India, he went to Vrindavan, and all these people that saw Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, it's described that Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu didn't, his weapon in this age of Kali was not, he didn't have a sword or a bow and arrow, or his weapon was his beauty. And it's described that when people would just see Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, they would become overwhelmed with ecstasy, and they would actually they could develop love of God just from seeing Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And it's similarly described that his associates, the Panchatattva, members of the Panchatattva and the other associates of the Lord, who were so dear to the Lord, who were so much his... of course, we know that the Lord sells himself to his devotees. So he had sold himself to these wonderful devotees who had come from the spiritual world and were there to assist him. And also them, Prabhupada says in the Caitanya Caritamrita that he's quoting actually Narottam Das Thakur's song, that they are, even the associates are qualified to give love of God to anybody who associates with them. So they were all very potent. So it was a wonderful kind of coming together, Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and these wonderful devotees, to spread this love of God, of course throughout India and, by default throughout the world. So at the time, Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu travelled to various places. Wherever he went, that place became completely auspicious. And I think it was Srila Bhaktisiddhanta, 108 places just around Navadvip and around Orissa and Bengal. They were holy places, and he placed the lotus feet of Lord Chaitanya plaques in these various holy places throughout Bengal and Orissa in honour of Lord Chaitanya, because he purified all those places that he went, and turned those devotees into, those people into devotees. So, as well for us, Lord Chaitanya has created so much auspiciousness, that beginning, that flowering, this time that he came, 500 and more years ago, it was the start of something that's going to suffuse this whole planet, because that's the prediction. So for the next 10,000 years, this Sankirtan movement and this chanting of Hare Krishna is going to actually, like a mini golden era, is going to transform this planet. So, of course, most of us won't be around very long to see all that, but the coming generations, and we can see that with this ISKCON movement how it has burgeoned in the most wonderful way, and how people in the most remote areas are able to take up Krishna consciousness and read the books, Bhagavad Gita, etc., that which is being distributed. So this is all Lord Chaitanya's grace, this movement. It's Lord Chaitanya's desire. It's described that Lord Chaitanya is not an incarnation as such, but he's directly Radha and Krishna. He wanted to taste Radha's sweetness. He wanted to feel that love Radharani has for him. So he took this beautiful, stunning golden form and came to taste that. And as well, there's so many things that the Lord does with one activity. But also, he was responding to Advaita Acharya to bring the holy name for this age. So sometimes in other Kali Yugas, we just have a Shaktavish avatar come, but Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu himself came, that is, Radha and Krishna came in one body to give this wonderful holy name. And it's almost as if Lord Chaitanya is golden, and it's almost as if that golden aspect of Lord Chaitanya has imbued our lives with all auspiciousness. So, sometimes you feel like we found gold because we found Srila Prabhupada's messages and Srila Prabhupada's devotees, and we were able to start chanting Hare Krishna. So Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu himself is gold, and this message that he's giving out is gold. So the more we can take up that chanting and transform our lives, the more auspicious, lucky, fortuitous, everything about Lord Chaitanya, his movement is also all these things, fortuitous and bound to succeed and propitious and all these aspects of auspiciousness. That's his movement. So that's our, like, the blessing that's come into our lives, that we've got this all auspicious movement here that we are part of. And it's like the most miraculous thing, because we're really kind of at the bottom of the pile when you think of all the great scholars and rishis and sages and everything else that have taken their birth in India and taken up spiritual life and had a life that's full of the Vedic understandings and various sacrifices and austerities to please the Lord. And somehow or another, in the very sort of darkest corners of the planet, then Lord Chaitanya's light and gold has touched, thanks to Srila Prabhupada. We've been studying the fourth canto, myself and a god sister, and it's interesting to see that when Bhrigu Muni cursed Lord Shiva's followers, Srila Prabhupada makes mention many times of Lord Shiva's followers being long-haired, unclean, and addicted to intoxicants. So when he went to America, when Srila Prabhupada went to America, he was faced with all these unclean, long-haired, addicted to intoxicants people, and Prabhupada calls them atheists because they don't accept the Vedas. So all the things that were like the Bhrigu's curse, it seemed to have kind of descended upon these people that Srila Prabhupada had to deal with. And yet that he had such a strong desire to transport that mercy of Lord Chaitanya's to all these souls, that he put aside all these faults and shortcomings, and they're actually completely disqualifications. You could say that we were completely disqualified. You could accurately say we were completely disqualified. But because Srila Prabhupada knew this message of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu had to go through the whole world, then he just did everything that one could even imagine a holy man could do to tolerate the faults and challenges and that the aspiring bhaktas had, and to encourage them with his teachings and all his loving dealings, loving personal dealings. He completely encouraged the devotees to take up this process of Lord Chaitanya and not to worry that we didn't have the sanskars, that we didn't have the qualifications, because Lord Chaitanya's message was very much that it did not matter that you weren't a high-class brahmana. As before, everybody had to be high-class brahmanas to get this message. Even so many, the Brahminical culture was like the summum bonum, and everybody else sort of fell beneath. And people always just sort of gave that natural, they had the natural idea that those brahmanas are the ones who are going to be the spiritual ones, and someone who is born in a low-class family just did not get those same opportunities. But Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu really smashed that, and he had Ramananda Roy, who was like from the Kayasta class. He had Haridas Thakur, Muslim, Sanatan and Rupa Goswamis, who had been mixing with Muslims and were outcasts. So no, he constantly taught that it didn't matter what your caste was or your creed, you simply take up this chanting of Hare Krishna. So we are incredibly fortunate at this time in Kali Yuga to have had the disciplic succession coming down after Lord Caitanya Mahaprabhu and the devotees who followed. Particularly, we're just going back to Srila Prabhupada, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, the preaching that they did and the enthusiasm that they had to give this movement to the lowest and never to think of their situation, their bodily situation. Because it's there in the Bhagavad Gita, it doesn't matter if you're a learned and gentle Brahmin, an elephant, a dog eater, an outcast, everybody's spirit soul. But somehow or another, that rigid caste system in India had sort of precluded so many people. But Lord Chaitanya really fought against that. And therefore, his followers also, and Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati nearly was murdered because the caste brahmanas were so upset with him that he was disturbing the whole status quo, of their superiority. And then we had Srila Prabhupada, of course, who went amongst the very lowest in order to give this message of Lord Chaitanya. So this chanting of Hare Krishna that we've been given is our greatest fortune. And Srila Prabhupada has many times talked about the importance of this chanting of Hare Krishna. He said our bead bag is our ticket back to Godhead. And that this chanting is the thing that will elevate. When the devotees go out on the street and chant Hare Krishna blissfully, people just cannot believe, what have they got to be so happy about? Because they're walking along, immersed in their sorrows, and their troubles. And suddenly you've got this Sankirtan party and everybody's blissful and they're singing the holy name like anything, dancing. It's a miraculous thing. And I always think like that Lord Chaitanya, like he can dance into our hearts, that golden Lord can dance into our hearts and, enliven us with this chanting of Hare Krishna. And that's kind of what the devotees do out on the streets. They sort of dance into people's psyche. So we can always be, grateful. For this age, Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is the avatar. He's the teacher. Of course, we've got so many, when we go through the Srimad Bhagavatam, this is all from a different age, and they performed incredible sacrifices in incredible austerities. And Srila Prabhupada made our austerities very small. Follow the 4 regulative principles. It's not that hard, and chant Hare Krishna. And so many times he used to say, what is the difficulty? Because, our minds make it difficult. But actually, we're so fortunate. It's so simple, really. If we can just follow those principles and chant the holy name of the Lord, then all auspiciousness is ours. And the more we can focus on that holy name that Lord Chaitanya has given us, the more he's merciful to us. And when he's merciful to us, he takes away our material desires. So I think I'll finish there. And thank you very much. And if anybody has anything to add, comments, questions? Yes. Vaishnavi.
Thank you for the class. You were mentioning that even Lord Chaitanya's associates, they empower to also give liberation and love of Godhead. I was just reflecting how that also depends on our mood of approaching that personality because, for example, Vikasura, he approached Lord Shiva, who is known as the greatest Vaishnava, but he approached him because of material motives. Whereas there was one Brahmana who approached Lord Shiva, and then Lord Shiva directed him to Sanatana Goswami, where he was given that touchstone. So I was just thinking that it also depends. It's not just, oh, we ask for mercy, mercy, mercy. We also need to try to also purify our desires, because we have to be so careful if we approach with the wrong intention. Because also I've observed sometimes senior devotees, someone approaches them and they say, oh, I'm doing such and such and such, and they say, okay. Because they can see that, I've even heard some of them say that they don't instruct the person because that person is not ready to hear. And Vaisheshika Prabhu always, when I hear his classes, he said we should always be the saying of, I learn to be corrected. Of course, it has to be done in a loving way, but we always need to be open to guidance and correction, otherwise we won't progress. It's like sometimes some devotees say, we'll always remain like the Prashadam Bhakta, but we want to progress. We don't want to, even though there's benefit in having Prashadam, but the movement is a movement. I remember Bhakti Charu Swami saying, it's a movement because it moves, it's not static.
Yeah, I just was reading a quote from Srila Prabhupada the other day, that this movement is not just for those who are looking for spiritual life. That's a quote from Prabhupada. That everybody, if they chant Hare Krishna, they'll get benefit. But, people take up the movement, take up the chanting, and take up spiritual life according to their desires, that's for sure. And the purification will come slowly or more quickly according to how much. It's just like, like the whole goal is to surrender to Krishna, surrender to Guru, surrender to Krishna. But, we're at different stages and there's different things that are preventing us. They're kind of like a rope that's sort of pulling us back. So, but the more we can do that and, take advice and listen to what Prabhupada's telling us and actually do make that a practical part of our lives, then the faster our anarthas will go. But still, the movement's for everybody. So even if people aren't, exactly like super ready to hear all the time, as long as they keep on chanting. That's the nice thing about the Hare Krishna Mahamantra, and what Lord Chaitanya, what Srila Prabhupada has given us, that there's progress there, but you know what I mean, it may take more time. Yeah. It's interesting, yeah, thanks. Okay, Hare Krishna Jai, Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu ki Jai.